Chapter 30. The Great Shadow War. Plan for World Domination. It was roughly the year 1220, somewhere in the dry plains of Central Asia. The powerful Merid, Thanatos, grew tired of the Jinn race only being a minor disturbance on Earth. Their existence, his kind, the Jinn, were completely dependent on human actions. Without an abundance of misery and despair, the Jinn were growing weaker and were in danger of completely dying off. Thanatos needed human suffering for the survival of his kind, but then he was not simply satisfied with just surviving. He had larger aspirations in mind. When he observed his species, he realized that they were not optimizing their full potential and were nowhere near close to achieving the heights of their ultimate power. He wondered why his kind possessed so much power, yet they were relegated to something less than the human race, a race of species that he considered weak and inferior. The power of Jinn should not just rely on the decisions of people. He dreamt of cultivating a world where Jinn were not just the effects of misery, but rather the cause. They could be truly powerful. The Jinn were creatures of misery, born out of true destruction. Thanatos knew the only way for them to thrive and achieve great power on Earth was through widespread devastation and death. Humanity needed to suffer, and Thanatos believed the best way to create human suffering was to wage war against humankind. Thanatos enlisted the advice and aid of the only other Jinn as powerful as he was. He summoned Gaia, the Jinn god of chaos, and Phobter, the Jinn god of nightmares. The three Merid met at a location believed to be in China, along the Silk Road. They agreed to work together to implement Thanatos' plan. Before this point, the Jinn had no organized society, and they did not work together. Some were powerful, and others were weak. The three self-proclaimed gods decided to change this and evolve. They recruited all the Jinn they could to form an elite group of attackers. But there still wasn't enough destruction. Gaia suggested that they find or possibly create a larger source of chaos. So the Jinn gods sent their shapeshifters in the form of human to find and create opportunities. An empire was rising in the east that was already on the cusp of war. The Mongols only needed a small push. The shapeshifters put themselves in whatever seats of power they could find and managed to influence the emperor into a campaign that would wreak havoc across most of Eurasia. The result surpassed what the Merid had expected. The devastation was widespread, and the number of Jinn rose exponentially. The Merid recruited the new Jinn to mobilize an army of ghouls in Sela. Over the next 100 years, the Jinn army grew in numbers until finally it was ready. Led by the three great generals, the Jinn army set a course of destruction that moved through China, then Crimea, and spread out through much of Asia until finally reaching Constantinople in 1347. From there, they traveled eastward to Gaza and north along the eastern coast, reaching Lebanon, Syria, and Palestine. In 1348, the Jinn invaded Antioch. Mecca was attacked in 1349, and during the same year, the cities of Mosul and Baghdad were also devastated. The world dubbed this march of the Jinn army the Black Death, and mistakenly attributed the extinction of over 100 million lives solely to a disease pandemic, the Black Plague. The Black Plague masked the Jinn havoc and allowed them to slaughter without detection. In truth, the real plague on the world was the Jinn. The sisters finally understood the cost of their actions. They needed to protect their creations. The only force that could defeat the Jinn was one of pure gold. After searching for decades, they finally found a young couple in 1345. The couple was given the task of finding and building an army of good. This too soon learned that the only truly worthy ones were children, not yet jaded by the evils of the world. This collection of gifted young people, possessing extraordinary powers, formed the Keeper's army. The Keepers traveled from place to place, building their army. Along the way, they fought many small battles against the local Jinn. They were learning and building. In just under 4 years, this massive endeavor resulted in over 4,000 troops. And although their numbers paled in comparison, the Keeper's army had no voice but to be ready for the Great Shadow War. After a year of fighting, the Keeper's army marched into Europe, continuing to fight Jinn in the shadows. The dwindling opposing armies now found themselves in a strange land set to begin their final showdown.